All right, welcome back to Addicted to Film. This week, Travis and I are honored to have a filmmaker whose film we both had an opportunity to see at Sundance. I've gone on record, I know Travis has as well. My favorite film at the festival, I want to welcome onto our show, Mr. Steve James. Steve James, I'm honored.
Me too.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Well, I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is, how familiar were you with Roger Ebert's story before you got into this? Like, we all know him as the film critic, but not a lot of us know about his backstory, really. How much did you know beforehand?
Well, the truth is, I knew very little except about Roger the film critic. I mean, and I admired him as a critic, and I read him as a critic, and I'd watched the show for a lot of years. But I did know his life story, and so it wasn't until I read the memoir that I really decided that I wanted to do the movie, because he had had such an extraordinary life. He says that he looks at his life as if it's a movie, and he's living in it. He doesn't know where it's going, and it had a kind of quality of a sort of great movie, a sprawling epic in and of itself.
Now, we know that Roger loved your film Hoop Dreams back in '94, and you guys sort of had a relationship. Was it a relationship that was just strictly professional, or was it a little closer than that?
Yeah, no, I mean, Roger was a great champion of Hoop Dreams, but I never really became more than just professionally, friendly with him. We didn't buddy around at all, even though we were both in Chicago. I probably saw him less than 10 times over the 20 years since Hoop Dreams came back, and it was always very courteous and quick, and then I'd scurry away because I always thought that as a filmmaker and him being a critic that you couldn't be fraternized, and I think that actually served this film well, because I wasn't beholden to Roger out of friendship. I think it freed me up to kind of discover Roger in the making of the film in a lot of ways, but also make a film that I hope is not hagiography in any way, that is as candid and honest about him as what he loved about his favorite movie.
It's interesting that you bring that up about not wanting to get close to him, be friends, because there's kind of a section about that in the movie where he's talking about, what was the movie? Was it The Color of Money? I think it was the movie he's talking about.
Where with Scorsese?
He's talking about how he can't really. People thought he was being biased.
Yes.
So it's kind of the same thing you were not wanting to do for years.
Yeah, I mean, he became very close, like with Martin Scorsese, over the years, and I think that there were some critics who felt like if you become too friendly with a filmmaker, then you can no longer review their films in any kind of objective way, because that friendship is going to color your review. And there were critics who felt that happened with Roger. I think Roger, if he was sitting here today, would vociferously disagree. He would say that he did not compromise the way in which he reviewed movies. And in the case of Martin Scorsese, he fairly pilloried Color of Money after the friendship was well underway. So, but I think the thing with Roger with filmmakers was that he just, there were certain filmmakers, and it was very few, that he kind of fell into friendships with because he both admired the work and he thought they were really fascinating and interesting people apart from the work. And I think one of the things that did for them, or for him as a critic, is it gave him a window into the way filmmakers think and the way they work, and an understanding of the filmmaking process from a critic point of view that was rare on behalf of most critics who don't have those kind of relationships with filmmakers.
Now, you had some really revealing kind of stories and anecdotes that are in the film, but the one that I think, or the section that I think that really kind of emotionally moved me, was the relationship between him and Gene Siskel. Talk a little bit about that, because I don't want to spoil it for people who have not seen the film yet.
Well, yeah, I mean, in Roger's memoir, there's a chapter devoted to Gene, and it's a funny chapter in a lot of ways. He recounts some of their banter in a few instances, but it's a sort of sentimental, reminiscent, tone that throughout that chapter about losing Gene, which was beautiful to read. But I also knew that that there was more competitiveness and vitriol in that relationship than I think he was willing to write about in his memoir at this point in his life. And so that was really important in film that we capture that, because I think that without question, Gene was one of the central relationships of Roger's life, and certainly the central professional relationship of his life. I mean, Roger was forged in the fires of his fights with Gene Siskel, I think, and it made him a better critic, and it made Gene a better critic, and of course it made them both famous.
I've read the memoir, and it's pretty thick. I mean, it's pretty long. How did you kind of decide what to include, what not to include, what paths you were going to follow? It seemed like that'd be complicated in and of itself.
It was complicated. I mean, since you've read the memoir, you know that there was a lot to choose from. But I think one of the things I knew off the bat was that I wasn't going to spend an inordinate amount of time in Roger's childhood years. Now, the first 130 some pages of the book are really about growing up in Champaign, and there's some really important moments in that, and very interesting, life experiences from that, particularly about his dad and his relationship to his dad, who died when he was young. Those were things I picked out of that I really wanted to focus on in the film. But for me, the main part of this story begins when Roger gets to Chicago, because that's really where his life takes off. And so that was one way in which I could kind of distill down this very long memoir for the film. The other thing is that I tried to find what I perceived from Roger's writing to be the most significant people in his life and the most significant places and moments. So, of course, the show had to be front and center. And I make the show more front and center in the film than he does in the memoir. But that's something I knew from the get-go I was going to do. But then there were certain people, like Bill Nack, his college friend of 50 years. He had to be in the movie, and he's great in the movie. Or John McHugh, who he met when he first got to Chicago and was his best Chicago friend. He had to be in the movie. And then, of course, his life with Chaz. And the drinking and the bars, and, how could you not put, his exciting adventure with Russ Meyer and Beyond the Valley of the Dolls.
That was great.
I mean, my God,
Right.
I'd be an idiot to not put that in there. So there were certain things that, just cried out to have to be in this movie, because they not only are really entertaining, but they kind of capture, I felt like, the essence of Roger, this guy who kind of just loved life and embraced life in all its sort of craziness and complexity. And then, of course, Chaz. I mean, Chaz is such a significant part of the memoir, and of course she's a very significant part of our movie as well, because she really saved Roger, not just from bachelorhood, she saved his life many times over in those later years when he was struggling with the cancer.
Now, we both had an opportunity to see this movie back at Sundance in January, and in my setup, I told you it's been 5 months in the process of waiting to talk with you. I've seen the movie once, and it is kind of embedded and burned into my psyche, and I can actually remember the crowd. Travis, you were there.
Oh yeah.
It was like there were the parts that were humorous, people laughed, but then it was a pall kind of over it, not in a negative way, but like people were really, really moved. Has that been the reaction that you've been getting as you've been, from Sundance and on the way to promoting this film to its release?
Yeah, I mean, that Sundance premiere was special. It was the world premiere. I think there were people there. We were all there, and I didn't really realize this until the film kind of was over, that in a way we were all there to celebrate Roger's legacy in life and also to mourn him. And I think we all felt that in the room. But I'm happy to say that since then I've seen the film in a variety of settings, some festival settings or Indiegogo screenings that we did to help raise money, and at Cannes, we showed the film at Cannes, and the response has been very consistently, a lot of laughter, a lot of engagement from the audience, and then when it gets poignant, it gets very quiet, and you hear the sniffles and the crying. So it's been consistently that. I mean, when we showed the film at Ebert Fest in his hometown before 1,200, lovers of Roger, I mean, you can imagine what an extraordinary screening that was as well. So it's one of the things that, when I do these interviews, that people talk about, you know, how candid it is about the cancer and the last months of his life that we were able to capture, which is all true. But I don't want people to forget what a sort of, you know, entertaining life he had that we show you. And you know, there's a lot to laugh at this movie. It's not just it's not a sad story.
Yeah, a friend of ours, Nell Meno, was at
Right.
Ebert Fest today, and she commented on how touching that was. I was kind of thinking, because Ebert was such a big fan of Hoop Dreams. Did you ever feel like, and this is maybe just the vanity in me, did you ever think about like talking more about the fact that he liked your movie so much?
No, no, it's a good question. I mean, on the team, our team of filmmakers, we talked about this, and we talked about it in the editing especially, about whether we should in some way put Hoop Dreams in there. When we have like a little informal test screening with our colleagues and stuff that we do with these films, it came up like, why isn't Hoop Dreams in there? And really, what the decision to not put Hoop Dreams in there was really basically came down to that what Roger did for Hoop Dreams, he did for so many filmmakers.
Right.
And there's a great example already in the movie, which is Errol Morris with Gates of Heaven.
Right.
He really rescued that film, and then he and Gene went on to champion that film every chance they got, and that's what he did. That's what they did for Hoop Dreams. And so I just felt like it wasn't necessary to put Hoop Dreams in a film I'm making about Roger. Now, if another filmmaker had made this film, they might very well have come and interviewed me about Hoop Dreams, and I would have been honored to talk about what Roger did for that film and for my career going forward from there. But it felt too self-serving and unnecessary to really put Hoop Dreams in this film.
So just in the same way that, as you talked about Roger saving his film or saving another filmmaker's film or even boosting your film, do you feel like during the process when you were making the film that you were responsible, since you had the blessing of Chaz, to preserve Roger's, his legacy?
Well, I think that there's a lot of ways in which Roger's legacy is being preserved. I mean, first of all, the website. I think there was a lot of people that felt like once Roger died, RogerEbert.com might just drift away in terms of significance. And the fact is that it hasn't. They have as many followers today, I think even a few more than they had when he was alive. And I think part of that is people found the site in the wake of his death and keep coming back. But you don't keep coming back if it's not good.
Right.
And so that's a big legacy builder, because that's where Roger's life work resides, and it continues to be a vibrant and important voice in the world of film going forward, even without him. But its spirit's there. But I think, when it comes to this film, yes, I think once Roger passed away, it sort of hit me that there may be other films made about Roger, and I hope there are, but that this is going to be the only one that he's a part of in the way that he is. And I felt a tremendous responsibility and just hope that I would get it right, that I would do right by him, and make a film that even if it wasn't about him, that he would love. That he would just love this portrait of this guy who came from Southern Illinois and had a remarkable life journey and made a difference.
And you did?
Yeah, I agree. I think you pretty much covered everything.
Absolutely.
You certainly covered my next question, so great. I think we're good.
All right, so
All right, guys. Awesome.
One more time, Steve, you just don't understand how honored we both are, because, as I said, absolutely, hands down, my favorite film. Loved it. Don't cry. I always tell him that I make it a habit never to cry at movies.
Is that right?
I was moist. I was like, oh my God, I hate you, Steve James. But I want to thank you for spending some time with us. And we're going to take a break right now and come back with more Addicted to Film.